Welcome to welcome to the Faith Coordinating Center's grantee webinar. I am Dr. Allison Matthews. I'm the Executive Director of the Faith Coordinating Center here at Wake Forest University School of Divinity. So I see so many new faces, and so I'm so excited to see that we're going to have some diversity of applicants, and I'm excited to have you here. Even if you don't get funded from us through this grant round, we still encourage you to stay connected to us and to join our trainings and webinars and be a part of our network, because there will be other opportunities for funding and collaboration, even if you're not selected for this round of funding, but we hope you are. We just know that all of y'all are amazing and we want you to be a part of it. Okay, so the Faith Coordinating Center, our goal is to transform the story around HIV in Southern communities in order to respond to the HIV crisis and promote positive health outcomes. And so we do that, of course, through grant making. We also do free trainings that are open to the public, and some trainings that are also just for the cohort of grantees, so that we can help expand your skill set and make sure that you are sustainable and help you scale and grow your organizations. We're also committed to making sure that you all are financially sustainable, so we always try to connect you to additional funding opportunities. So we also are tasked with doing storytelling. We use the art of storytelling. We partner with experts in HIV, faith, stigma, healing, mental health, and music. We develop social media and communication toolkits for faith communities. And we also partner with artists and national media to amplify messages around HIV. Like I mentioned, the trainings, these are some of the topics that we cover. Of course, as we continue to learn more from our organizations and funded partners, we try to come up with additional trainings that we think are going to be useful for the community. And we have different funding opportunities, mostly focused on helping build the capacity of your organization to do the work, to implement communications and educational programming, or to address the social determinants of health and health ministries, and to establish or expand those health ministries. This is our wonderful team. Shonda Jones, Dr. Shonda Jones is the principal investigator. She's the one who was awarded the grant from Gilead Sciences. We are funded by Gilead Sciences, and we are one of 4 coordinating centers throughout the U.S. South. So the other coordinating centers include Southern AIDS Coalition, the University of Houston School of Social Work, and the University and Emory University School of Public Health. And so we collaborate with them on building the capacity of the organizations to do the work. We collaborate. We also communicate with each other about the funding opportunities. We collaborate on the storytelling and kind of large scale media activations. And so, you know, even though you'll be connected to Wake Forest University, we'll also be working to connect you to other partners and, relationships and opportunities, training opportunities and other things through the Compass Network. So these are some of the organizations that we have funded in the past. And some examples of the projects that they have done. They have produced documentaries and videos. They produce podcasts and TV and radio shows. Many of them have hosted conferences and worked with and done trainings of faith leaders. So they, for example, the Vision Community Foundation hosts a conference every year called I Elevate, and they had about 250 faith leaders that they trained to talk about HIV and implement HIV programming. And then throughout the year, they followed up with them to see what kind of impact they had and what kind of support they needed to continue the work around HIV. Interfaith Youth Corps is another good example. They are an organization that works with that for this project is working with historically Black colleges and universities throughout the South. And so they gave them mini grants to those. I think they had about 20 HBCUs that they work with, and they gave those HBCUs mini grants to implement HIV programming and with that intersection of faith in their HBCU campuses, or to integrate it into the curriculum for, like, say a professor applied from a university, they would work with a student group or integrate it into their classroom or something like that. Samuel DeWitt Proctor Conference was another great example of an organization that hosts a national conference every year. We literally were just at it last month. We do try to make sure that we travel and support the organizations. So they had about 750 faith leaders who attended that conference. And in addition to the conference, they had an institute, it's called the Bayard Rustin Institute, that continues to train faith leaders and talk about sex and sexuality, LGBT issues, HIV, et cetera. So those are some examples. It's not the fully comprehensive of everyone, but those are some examples. We also have the Reaching All HIV Positive Muslims in America. So we do try to make sure that we not only are reaching Christian communities, but traditional African spirituality, Muslim, Buddhist, right? And so we have representation not only in our funding, but also on our advisory board to make sure that we are effective at engaging interfaith denominations and communities and organizations. We have partnerships with Atrium Health Wake Forest Baptist because we are housed at Wake Forest University. We also have partnered with Old North State Medical Society. They are the second oldest Black-led medical society in North Carolina. We work with the University of North Carolina Center for AIDS Research, the U.S. HIV/AIDS Faith Coalition, and Balm and Gilead. So those are many of our organizations that we have partnered with to do either programming or trainings, or we do creative things like pop-up churches at conferences or at music concerts. We actually did a pop-up church at Pharrell Williams festival, Something in the Water in Richmond. And so we encourage you all to think about, be creative in your projects. I do want to just mention though that your grant proposal should not just have one event in it. If it's just a conference and nothing else, then that won't be as competitive as someone who has a conference, plus they're planning to do ongoing engagement with the people and sustaining the partnerships with them. So you have to have a plan for what you're going to do throughout the year, rather than it just being like, we're just going to do these videos, and then once we're done with the videos, we're done with the project. Like, that is not really what we're looking for with this work. So we have 3 funding opportunities that are available, and you actually could go to the gileadcompass.com website now, and all of our requests for proposals, our RFPs, are available on that website, and they're live, and the applications are live right now. So you could go on there and access them and start your applications. They are not due until May 8th. So I'll go over all of this in more detail in the slides, but just letting you know that we wanted to give you all more time to work on your applications. So that's why we're opening them in March, and they're due in May. So the first funding opportunity that we have available, answer the question, which grant are you interested in? So the first funding opportunity that we have available is the Learning It Together Artist Cohort Grant. And so this one is $25,000 for a general cohort member, and then $40,000 for an artist in residence position. And so I'm sorry, I can't move this poll. I can't see on the screen, but the artist cohort, we work with them. They meet I think they meet twice a month, or at least once a month. They meet at least once a month. I have bi-monthly on here, but they at least meet once a month as a cohort. And you're supposed to, the model is for them to work to learn from each other. And we also have coaches who are facilitating trainings that are specific to the experiences of artists and how to enhance the sustainability of your work, to access more funding and fundraising, how to run a business, but also how to talk about HIV, how to integrate messages about HIV and faith into your artwork. The funding, the artists that we have right now, one is working on a documentary and is doing some videos in social media engagement. Another one has a play, and so we funded them to implement the play in their local community and to do it in multiple sites. Another one is here at Wake Forest, and I think is on the call, and he is our artist in residence, and he is doing some guest lectures at the university and with different community groups that we have. And he's doing an artist lecture. He's doing an installation of his sculpture, and also doing workshops with faith communities in Florida as well as other places, and also doing a lot of social media engagement. In addition, we have another artist who is doing an installation. It's like a mixed media with music, audio, visual art. And so that one is also kind of commemorating the people who have died from complications with AIDS, who were church musicians. And so playing their music, and as people walk closer to the installation, the music gets louder. And then as they walk away from the installation, the music gets softer. So some really beautiful and creative ways to deliver these messages and engage people in the content around HIV and faith. All right.
Allison, really quickly, are you, we have a question in the chat. Do you want to wait till the end or right now? Okay, so the question is, with a proposal that draws artists from across a region to create a pool of, this thing keeps popping up.
I can't get rid of it.
Now, to create a pool of them that contribute to raising the awareness and reducing the spread of HIV across their regional areas, annually be a possible candidate for the grant.
But a proposal that draws artists from across the region to create a pool of them that contribute to raising. Yes, that sounds interesting. Can you expand more on that, Samuel Nixon?
Yes, thank you. I've engaged with faith communities across the country that are involved in HIV/AIDS, either training or awareness kinds of things. And some of them are faith leaders, and some are community leaders. But the artists that are in those communities, one of the things that we speak to is how they can use their talents to help both raise and engage thought around prevention, HIV prevention, as well as support to families who are working with those living with HIV. So we look at ways to open up the door for artists to make their statements in terms of contributing to that. So my question was raising if we developed a pool of artists that rotating of different types, artists of different, some would be visual artists, some would be musicians, and some would be other types of artists. But the thought was, say, and I'll just use this example, once a quarter, it could be either one or two artists that would be focused on raising the awareness and the prevention of HIV, for first quarter of the year. The second quarter might be another group, a pool that's doing some things. So if it was a ongoing annual quarterly contribution of local artists to addressing the issue of HIV, would that be something that would be a potential mechanism for support?
Yeah, I definitely, so the artist cohort is really designed for individual artists to participate in the cohort. If you are going to do something like a regional with multiple artists, I would actually suggest that you apply for one of our other funding categories that could potentially get you more money. So I'll go over those in a second, and you'll see it might be a little bit more appropriate. So it's not to say that you can't do an arts-based project for the other grants if you want to do that, that's great. We love it and we encourage it. And they could even take advantage of the trainings from the artist cohort. But I think what it sounds like from what you've described, the other funding might be more appropriate because it gives you a little bit more flexibility. This is like the artists are meeting with each other. They're learning from other artists. They're learning how to, like, the content, the trainings and the content is really focused on building up their experience as artists. So if you were to apply for another grant and you had this cohort of artists, then we would encourage them to join these trainings. But I don't necessarily know if $25,000 would be enough for what you're proposing. So that's what I would suggest.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. This one is more individually focused than it is group, systematic group focus across regions or national. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
All right. I understand. Thank you.
So the artist in residence, like I mentioned, is $40,000. It's a 30-day residency. They are required to deliver a guest lecture. And we, as Wake Forest, will provide 1 month of housing, travel, meals, office space, and access to a makerspace. But you have to include that in the $40,000 budget. Artist cohort produce work connected to the themes around HIV and faith, and you'll have an opportunity to present your work and provide a portfolio of your completed work. In addition to that, we have conferences and events and things that we have throughout the year. So we can and will call on the artists to be a part of that. And one of our members of the artist cohort didn't get the artist in residency, but she still wanted kind of that experience. So she came for about a week and a half to Wake Forest and we connected her to to the documentary studies department and connected her to people throughout the state of North Carolina. So we're always happy to do that, even if you don't get the artist in residence position. So of course, we're looking for people who are creating new works of art. It could be any media that you prefer, with a focus on things that address HIV-related stigma or the experiences of people living with HIV, faith-based trauma, healing, spirituality, interfaith perspectives. You could also propose formalizing an existing program that has been well received in your faith community or in your community in general, adapting an existing evidence-based intervention to include content that addresses faith at the intersection of HIV. So I know people who've done photo voice projects. I think that would fall under this category. Trainings for faith leaders and lay audiences using art, or how to, teaching them how to use and integrate arts-based initiatives into their work, or establishing connections, partnerships across those multiple sectors with the arts. So those are, some examples. It's not, of course, limiting what you all have, but these are just some examples of things that we think would be strong applications. So the Faith Action Grant is our next opportunity. The funding ranges between $25,000 to $50,000. And this, we're looking to fund organizations so that we can provide resources for action-oriented projects centered around faith to reduce stigma, engage in trauma-informed care, and change the perception of HIV in the South. We want to fund organizations committed to creating inclusive faith spaces. And so that doesn't, we have funded organizations that are more conservative and are not necessarily ready to take a stand on being open, accepting of LGBT community. And what we've had conversations with them about doing no harm. And so, even if there are organizations who are like, I'm not ready to do the LGBTQ thing, but we are committed to not putting out messages that are harmful and negative against that community, that's fine with us. So, we do encourage more conservative organizations to apply for this funding as well, because we want to tap into those networks and be able to educate people about HIV. If you are applying for $50,000, please make the case that your organization has the infrastructure. Like, the $25,000 is really for an organization that's like maybe 1 or 2, maybe 5 employees. Like, it's very small. You're just getting off the ground. You may or may not have a financial person, right? $50,000, you've got an accountant, you've got employees, you can hit the ground running with the money. You're reaching more, more than, a city or multiple organizations or a regional kind of reach, right? So $50,000, you're going to have to make the case and showcase in your grant, give us examples of what you've already done, who your partners are, what your reach is. You probably, have some kind of online presence, right? So that's really how we're making the distinction between those two funding opportunities or funding levels. We'll stop here. I know people have questions.
Allison, I have a question.
Sure.
When thinking about whether or not to apply for a faith action grant or an artist grant, what if the faith action program or project is centered around art? Like, in that case, would we then, should you then apply for the lit grant or?
No, I think the previous question was similar to this one. Yeah, if you have an arts related project, I encourage you, you can apply for the Faith Action Grant. The lit artist, the Learning It Together lit artist cohort is more so for an individual artist. Or for an organization that's, for individual artists or for implementing like an arts-based program, but, may not be as large scale, right? So, but for Faith Action Grant, we have another organization that has a Faith Action Grant, and they're doing a play. But they decided they're not necessarily the playwrights, they're just like implementing the play. So they applied for the Faith Action Grant. We have another person who did the lit cohort, he wrote the play, right? So he's a creative and he's going to benefit from the Learning It Together cohort. I think the Faith Action is like, say you're working with a group of artists or something like that, but you may not necessarily be the artist yourself. I think that might be a way to help you distinguish. Nay, does that help?
It does. Yeah, that helps. Thank you.
Okay, so the Faith Action Grant, all of these grant opportunities are for 12 months, and they're either monthly or bi-monthly meetings. Usually they're monthly meetings that are available via Zoom. They're required for your funding to, so we're looking to fund, these are some examples of projects that we're trying to fund, nonprofits in partnership with faith organization. For action-oriented projects centered around faith to reduce stigma, engage spiritually in integrated trauma-informed care, advance ability for faith communities to develop programs and initiatives or conduct research in their local religious communities, increase the capacity for the faith communities to address social determinants of health. And so that could mean maybe you do regular HIV testing, or you do a program where your faith community does referral and has community health workers, or you have a food bank and counseling and mental health support and things like that. We would be happy to fund faith communities who are doing that kind of work, or nonprofit organizations who are working with faith communities to do that kind of work. National campaigns, or just, communications around like social media or TV or radio or billboards, any kind of communications to address HIV stigma. And then of course, Gilead and we also have a priority for funding projects and organizations who are addressing disparities of Black cisgender women in HIV, because they are oftentimes left out of the funding and the programming for HIV. Okay, so our organizational resiliency grant is up to $100,000. We do reserve the right to fund at a lower, under $100,000, just depends on how many great applicants we get. These are similar, where the focus areas are going to be similar, but it's for a larger organization that has maybe a national reach, or a southern reach, or a regional reach, who's got an established kind of name and staff and infrastructure. So organizational resiliency grants support the establishment of infrastructures to enhance communications, trauma-informed care, health ministries, and other programs. So some of the organizations we funded at this level include like the Proctor Conference or the Interfaith America. The Proctor Conference, has, like I mentioned, 750 faith leaders who came to their conference. Interfaith America has 20 HBCUs that they're working with, and they're able to have this substantial reach. They did many grants, and so they gave out some of their money to those institutions, and so that's what we're really looking for this $100,000 level. So we believe, we call our grantees funded partners because we're actually in partnership with them to do this work, to create a movement. We've launched a website called blackfaith.org, and the initiative is called Black Faith and HIV. And our goal is to have an impact in faith communities, to train faith leaders to address and educate others about HIV stigma, to engage faith communities to increase their capacity to address social determinants of health. We want our faith communities to be able to respond to health crises rather than exacerbating them. And we want to have an impact where we're coordinating national communications campaigns to address HIV stigma. And so some of the work that we've done at the Faith Coordinating Center includes partnering with Lil Nas X and to raise awareness about HIV. With him, we fundraised over $500,000 additional dollars that were granted to some of our organizations in the South. So we, of course, help fundraise for, as well as grant out money and amplify the messages. We work with Pharrell Williams and Something in the Water, and we're working on some more initiatives coming in the future that are also of a very national major scale. So it's certainly beneficial to be connected with us. Submission, how do you submit? So you go to www.gileadcompass.com. On the top right-hand side of that website, there's a button that says apply for funding or something like that. And that's the button you click. That will take you to the platform. You will need to create a profile on this. It's called Open Water. The platform is Open Water. You have to create a profile on Open Water and work to submit your responses. I suggest you go through the application and copy and paste the questions, put them in a Word document, work on them separately, and then copy and paste them back in. That to me is the easiest way to work on your applications. Clearly articulate how your project will address people living with HIV and be connected to faith communities. If you have letters of support from, say you're saying you're going to partner with XYZ organizations, have a letter saying, we endorse this organization. We've worked with them for years. They do great work. We commit to, if this project is funded, we commit to doing this XYZ work with them to help ensure that the grant is successful. So I typically will write out those letters of support. When I'm applying for grants, I write out those letters of support as a draft and send it to them and ask them to edit it, add their logo and their signature, and then I compile them into one PDF and upload it with my application. It actually makes your application very, very strong. Articulate how you will deliver your program. So we need specifics, not just general things. Like we need to know, like, okay, maybe you have a timeline for in June, we're going to start here. We're going to start with planning, or excuse me, July, because July 1 is when the funding will be released and your projects will start. So July 1, we'll do some planning, from August to September, from August to October, we're going to do some initial focus groups. From October to December, we'll implement our first program, so have a timeline. With that first program, we expect to have 50 attendees and 500 people online, or we expect to post, to post 10 things on social media with an average engagement of 500 views per post. So be specific, give some numbers, make it realistic and within the frame of what you can actually do, because you will have to report on your work throughout the year. Don't worry about the project being too small, or, we want to support grassroots organizations who haven't done this work before or who have been doing it. We also want to support organizations who have been doing this work and haven't been getting the funding. Think focused rather than big, broad programs or initiatives. Like we want you to be able to accomplish this within 1 year, right? So it has to be something that you can actually accomplish in a year. We also, with that, we are prioritizing grants that are reaching our priority population. So Black and Latinx, men who have sex with men, cisgender women, and those who are vulnerable to HIV, include substance use, people who use substances, and people who are vulnerable in other ways. So, they don't have to be living with HIV. If, say, your target is working to prevent HIV, so that obviously is people who don't have HIV, right? So that's okay, but we want it to be a part of a kind of the people who are most impacted in the community. I think that another kind of thing to think about to make a strong application is to make the case for why your city or your area is impacted by HIV, and how you have done, or you have, even if you haven't done HIV work, how you have connections in the community and you've already established a rapport and you've already done work, right? So making the case in your application for those things will make your application stronger. I'm pausing for questions. Okay, so eligibility, you have to be a 501c3 organization or have a fiscal sponsor. You have to operate in the 12 Deep South states: Alabama, Arkansas, Florida, Georgia, Kentucky, Louisiana, Mississippi, North Carolina, Oklahoma, South Carolina, Tennessee, Texas. If you are not in those states, you need to have a partnership with an organization that is in one of those states, and that organization needs to submit the application. So we have funded organizations that are not located in these states, but they have ties to organizations in these states, and they did it in collaboration with them, and that organization submitted the application. So that is, you could still write the application and then have them submit it, right? We want your award amount to reflect the scope of your project and related expenses. You can include some salary support, but I would not go over 40% of your current salary. We're not going to pay $85,000 for one person's salary, and then 25,000 or then 15,000 for the rest of the project. So you can support yourself, but it won't be your entire salary. All grant applications are due May 8th, 11:59 Central Standard Time. So that would be May 9th, 12:59 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Award notifications will be announced in June, and programmatic work will begin July 1. You should receive your checks, though, if you're awarded by July 15th. So you could start your work, you wouldn't get the check till July 15th because it takes us a little while to process applications.
We have a question in the chat. Or
Oh,
looks like another question.
Yeah, I see that.
Yes.
The fiscal sponsor does not need to submit the application. You, as the artist, would submit the application, and you have a letter from your fiscal sponsor saying that they are sponsoring you as the artist. The program does not, so we wouldn't necessarily automatically match funds from, if you got granted money from another organization, we wouldn't match those funds, no. But that's not to say that we would stop you from going to another organization who has committed to matching the funds. So say you get a grant from us, and this other organization says, if you get a grant from Faith Coordinating Center for $25,000, we'll match it for $25K. That's great. Go ahead, do that. But we wouldn't necessarily do it vice versa.
You know, that was my question. Actually, yeah, if we applied and you saw that we have a matching funds group that will supplement the project if you funded it. Do you accept those applications there?
We would accept it, but it wouldn't necessarily have a bearing on our decision making.
I understand. That's what I said. A contingency would be if you accepted the project.
Yeah.
That the letter of commitment from the other organization would be that they would provide supplemental funding to it. Mm-hmm. Okay.
I have a question as well.
Sure.
You mentioned working with HBCU, the HBCU community. Are you saying that if we already have like a relationship with them and we decide that they can come up with a mini initiative of their own on campus, we are able to fund that through that funding?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, great.
So the grant cycle is from July 1, 23 to June 30th, 24. All funds must be expended by then. We do not do extensions. You'll have to submit quarterly reports. And so those reports include like what worked, what progress have you made on your project? What are some of the challenges? What support do you need from us? How many people have you reached? How many people have you reached in person and on social media? So those are kind of the types of questions. And so we will provide the PDFs and the templates for those reports before you have to submit them. And we usually meet with the organizations about a week or so before the report. So you'll be amply prepared for those. Current grantees receiving funding from other Compass Initiative centers must demonstrate their ability to handle both grants, because we know that the other centers have extensive trainings and that they have a lot of requirements themselves, and you have to submit quarterly reports to both centers every time. So you need to make sure that you have the bandwidth to do that. We don't fund individuals. The artist is, if you are an individual artist, it has to be through a fiscal sponsor. So that's why we say fiscal sponsor, because it has to go through a nonprofit organization. And then grant recipients will be required to provide a narrative report and budget report at the end of the grant cycle. So we would just want to know how you spent the money. Okay, you can pay for program related costs, staff costs, supplies, technology, incentives, membership fees for required platforms. You cannot pay for medications, direct medical expenses, deficits of an organization, research or clinical trials, projects that influence or advance Gilead's business, including the purchase, utilization, prescribing, formulary position, pricing, reimbursement, referral, recommendation, or payment for products. Individuals, individual healthcare providers, or physical group practices. So when we say you can't pay an individual, like you, obviously we have incentives up here, so you could pay gift cards for participating in a focus group, but you can't go and pay an individual person's salary, right? So that's kind of the distinction there. Events or programs that have already occurred, of course, we will not support government lobbying activities. So the other kind of restriction, because this funding is from Gilead, you cannot talk about PrEP. PrEP is the HIV prevention medication that is produced by Gilead. And so we have a firewall kind of that prevents us from being able to talk about that medication, because we don't want it to be perceived as Gilead funding organizations to promote their product. So you can talk about HIV prevention medications in general. And you can say that there are different types, like one that you could take a pill a day. You could talk about it in generic terms, but you cannot just like promote PrEP. The documents that are needed for the application, a W-9, letters of support, your proposal. And so in the application, it just got question prompts. And so your proposal is basically you answering those questions. 501c3 verification or a fiscal sponsor, a letter of support from the fiscal sponsor, your operating budget. So if you're a church, say, what is the operating budget for the church? If you're a individual artist, it's not your salary, it's more like how much money did you have to spend on the work that you did last year. And so if it was $5,000, that's your budget. That's okay. We want you to put that down, because again, reminding you that we want to fund organizations that are smaller. So don't be embarrassed by that. I have had some applicants who have been like, oh, I only had $5,000. That's not really a budget. I'm like, it is a budget. You had some money. So put that down. It's okay. And then with the grant budget and narrative, we want you to break down, like, how do you plan to spend the money, and give us just like 1 or 2 sentences on why you put that much money in there and how you kind of calculated the estimated cost for your work. And then we have a work plan template that you also need to complete, basically outlining the goals of the project, what are the activities that need to be done to achieve those goals, who's responsible, and what's the timeline for getting it done. So all of these, we have a budget template and a work plan template and a W-9 that you can download directly from the application. We have links in the application for you to download it, work on it, and then upload it into the application. Again, this is our timeline. I've mentioned this before. Deadline May 8th, and then award letters by June, and funds received by July 15th. And then the grant is from July 1 to June 30th of 24.
Allison, we have another question in the chat.
Yep.
We've had this one before, but can you apply in more than one category?
No, you need to choose one. one category to submit to. If you do submit to another category, it needs to be a distinct project. It can't be the same project that you just apply for. So what I would suggest is, I would suggest you apply for the largest funding category that is appropriate for your organization so that you can be considered for that. And if we think your project is compelling, but maybe we don't necessarily want to give you or think you need $50,000, we may go down to $25K for you. So I would suggest that rather than applying for multiple categories. Okay, so PrEP, no, they have patented the word PrEP. Like PrEP it is short for pre-exposure prophylaxis, but they use PrEP, Truvada for PrEP. That is the name of the product. So no, you can say HIV prevention medication. It's for all three opportunities. Any funding from Gilead, any funding from Gilead, you are not allowed to talk about PrEP. I know it's crazy. It's hard also. So usually when we go out and talk about it, we say HIV prevention medication. Any other questions? All right, well, we're happy
So,
to.
Allison, I'm sorry, just to make sure we're clear. So if anybody asks about PrEP, then our response would just say, direct them to Gilead for.
No, I mean, I think.
Because if someone walks up and says,
It's really more so for like public talks or like anything recorded.
Okay.
Like I did a class lecture today and I mentioned PrEP, but it wasn't like and I also gave the disclaimer that I'm funded by Gilead. And so it was like, there's HIV prevention medications. One of them is called PrEP, but there are others, right? So, because we know cabotegravir and others that are being used now for HIV prevention medications. So I think it's just important for you to present all of the options and not just pushing PrEP or, and if people ask the question, you should answer it. I don't think you should leave people in the dark, but we cannot necessarily fund a project that is just going to be pushing PrEP for Black women or just being, like that's just, we can't do that.
Okay, I see what you're saying. I thought you were saying that we couldn't use the word at all, but I understand what you're saying, not to.
Right.
Okay, all right. How many projects were funded before?
The first year we funded 17. This past year we funded 18.
Okay, and this is the third year?
It'll be our third year.
Third year funding, okay. All right, thank you very much for your information.
And if you have questions or you need some more consultation, you can email us compass@wfu.edu.
Dr. Matthews?
Yes, Allison, hi.
Hey, how are you?
Good.
I just have a quick question. You mentioned that you all funded, you said 18 last year. How many people applied versus the amount of people that you all actually funded?
That's a good question. I don't have the answer right off the top of my head, but I want to say it was about 40.
Okay. All right. So like maybe close to 50%.
Mhm.
Okay. Thank you.
We try our best.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a good afternoon.
Thanks, y'all.
You as
Thank
well.
you.
Bye.
Thank you very much, Tom.
Bye.
Thank you. Very informative.